Well, hello there, thinking people. So today, sitting in my truck, we're going to have a logical conversation about God. In the next 10 minutes, we'll talk about whether or not there is a God, emotions related to God, things we know about religion, the logical nature of God, and a thought experiment. This is the first episode in a series of episodes where we will explore the logical God concept and what, if there were a God, it might logically look like. If we're going to talk logically about God, we have to begin somewhere, and the default logical position is that none of us know if God exists or not. We'll begin there because none of us has seen it, and none of us can show physical scientific evidence that God exists. That said, many people have had an experience that they perceive as God, and so to say with certainty that one does not exist discounts that experience millions of people claim to have had. And to say that there is discounts the scientific method and the fact that there has never been a provable demonstration or measurement of God. So we don't know has to be the logical beginning. First, there is zero material evidence of God, but is there non-material evidence of God? Is emotion and human experience evidence? Of course, scientifically, emotion is non-quantifiable. It's measurable only by the behavior it produces. And the behavior it produces is the sum of human existence. So to say that emotion is not valuable evidence in the conclusions humans come to about the nature of the universe is a really hard line that may be flawed. Emotion can't tell us about how quarks exist, or how water flows, or how certain fish can exchange their sex, but emotion can tell us who to love, what we'd like to eat, when to fight or flee. And though the emotions that create these behaviors can't be measured, they often result in observations that can be determined as truth. For instance, a lion threatens to eat you. It's likely that your emotional fear response will make you run away. And if you were to ask a scientist if it was true that that was a good response, they would likely agree that it was, even though you reached the conclusion based on emotion rather than scientific evidence. Emotion can result in truth. So then, can emotion inform us of the existence of God? Well, the answer is both no and yes. Millions of people have an emotional response to God. A good atheist will quickly point out that it's more likely that those people are having an emotional response to a fictitious God, in much the same way that a person has an emotional response to a fictitious character in a novel. But there's a difference. When having an emotional response to a fictional character, the reader is aware that the character is fictional, and the emotion, while genuine, is egocentric, drawing on the reader's own experience, personalizing the emotion, and the reader then associates the character with themselves, and the emotion they perceive for the character is actually just projection. The God emotion is different. The God emotion is a feeling of deep affection for or fear of a benefactor or creator or parent. It's an emotion that assumes the real existence of the being provoking the emotion, and so can't really be dismissed so easily as to call it affection for a beloved fictional character. How does believing that a thing is real make it real? Well, that's an interesting question that needs some clarification. Belief in yourself can allow you to do things that you've never attempted, and in a way that's manifesting something material through belief. I believe I can chop wood. I pick up an axe and chop wood. I know it's not the same as believing that the wood will chop itself, and it suddenly does, but we'll get to that. So does millions of people having emotional responses to a thing make it real? Well, again, that's kind of a question that needs clarification. At the very least, it's flimsy evidence, but it's an enormous percentage of the world's population that has experienced this emotional response, crafted their lives around it, and even lost their lives over it. So I think it's difficult to claim that just because there's no material evidence of God, that it doesn't exist. And the emotion of millions of people does count to some degree as a quantifiable measurement. On the other hand, there's a very solid argument that just because many people believe something doesn't make it real. So let's list some things that we do know about religion. All of them. There are thousands of religions, which means thousands of gods. Each of these thousands of religions claim to be true. They mean it. They all claim to be true. Belief in a particular God almost always relates to the age and geographic location the believer was born, and the religious beliefs of the family they were born into. No religion has ever offered tangible, undeniable proof of its God. All religions use logical fallacies and misdirection to provide evidence of God. No God has ever provided indisputable evidence of itself. But does this mean God doesn't exist? Well, no. Though it does mean that all of the gods proffered by organized religion probably don't. So what would the nature of God be if it's not one of these? Can we logically deduce the nature of God in the absence of material evidence? Maybe. So what can we logically deduce about God? Well, a God would have to be outside what we perceive as material, supernatural. It would have to be either eternal, nearly eternal, existing for trillions of years, or long dead. It would have to, or have had, if it's dead, incredible knowledge or incredible power, or both. It would have to be either an observer, disinterested in humanity, dead, or have some other reason for allowing humanity to play out without directing quantifiable intervention or interference. It would have to be intentionally obscuring itself. Otherwise, we would all fully understand its nature, because it would make itself materially quantifiable. This is our final and perhaps the most important point. So let's take these one at a time. Perhaps it's dead. Perhaps it expended all of its energy to create the universe and life, and then died, leaving the universe to tumble on infinitely without guidance. And this is why it has never made itself materially testable. If this is the case, it solves very little, because it stands to reason if it died, then it came from somewhere, and it was but one of a race of some supernatural entities that have a life cycle of some sort, and that race has no interest in us, so it or their existence is utterly useless, our examination of our own. A dead God is no God at all, but it might give us a convenient explanation of the beginning of the universe and why God doesn't make itself known. It also raises the questions, if it no longer exists, what energy maintains the universe it created? Okay, so perhaps it's not a dead God, which leaves a God that is either eternal or nearly eternal. But eternity is a problem. Eternity isn't the absence of time, or rather, it's not the absence of time passing from an eternal being's perspective. A clock may not be ticking away in a God's existence, but the passage of time and existence would be the two things that an eternal God could never escape. Time would be measured in the energy expended to complete a thought. Each thought process would have a beginning, middle, and end, and a God with nothing to do but think for eternity would have only this measure to mark its own existence. Next point, a God would have to have unimaginable knowledge or unimaginable power. It would essentially have to know everything, at least everything about what it's created, and it would have to be powerful enough to have created it, and it would have to be powerful enough to sustain it. Where would that power come from? Well, there are a number of physicists who are toying with the hypothesis that when you view the universe in its entirety, all the way down to quantum physics, the material of the universe appears to be very similar to a mind. It appears to model consciousness. It's hard to grasp, so we'll conduct a thought experiment. Okay. Close your eyes and clear your mind. I know. Now, in that void you've just created, imagine a planet. It doesn't have to be round. It can be as big or small as you like. It can be whatever color you like. Now imagine some stuff on it. Doesn't matter what the stuff is, but let's make it, some of it at least, alive. Make it grow. Imagine lots of that stuff and give it varying shapes and colors and sizes. Really try to visualize it. Now imagine a being on the surface of that planet. Give it whatever features you like. Imagine it residing on this planet and let it wander around, seeing all your planet has to offer. Now, as rudimentary as this thought experiment is, we're going to do the next step. I want you to, using your imagination, give that being knowledge of itself. That's right. Breathe consciousness into your being. Give it the ability to experience its surroundings and question its existence. Allow it to wonder about all you have imagined. Allow it to be aware of its own existence. The question is, what does this entity you've just imagined think of itself? Now that you've imagined it, does it ever stop being aware of itself? Does it go on even when you're not consciously thinking of it until you die? If you were a God with eternity on your hands, couldn't you perhaps imagine an entire universe for your new entity to reside in? And wouldn't that universe, from the point of view of your imagined entity, have rules that it could question and ponder? Or mysteries that it can't explain, like the beginning of the universe it resides in? Wouldn't that universe, utterly disassembled scientifically perhaps, resemble a mind because of It is exactly that. And wouldn't that universe also seem to behave in the same way as consciousness? All right, we're going to leave it there for this episode to give you time to think about and interact with your new living entity that you've just imagined. And we'll move on to point 3, which is God would have to be either an observer, disinterested in humanity, dead, or have some other reason for allowing humanity to play out without direct intervention or interference in episode 2. Do me a favor, please like and subscribe and share this video to your friends and family so you can dissect it and discuss it. I look forward to your comments below so I can answer your questions and perhaps learn from your opinions. Until next episode, please keep your mind open to ideas that you can prove.